When we think about learning, we usually think about adding things, right? Building new skills, memorizing new facts. But what if I told you that one of the brain's most powerful learning tricks isn't about adding, it's about subtracting? Today, we're going to dive into the brain's incredible ability to literally learn to forget, all to filter out the noise.
Okay, so we've got to start with this classic line. You've probably heard it before. For decades, this simple, elegant idea has been the bedrock of neuroscience. It's kind of the first rule you learn about how our brains forge connections and build who we are. And this whole idea is called Hebbian learning. The perfect example is learning to drive. Remember that? At first, every single move, the mirror check, the gas pedal, the blinker, it's all super deliberate. But you do it over and over, and those neurons fire together so many times that they wire up, and suddenly you're just driving. It's automatic. That's Hebbian learning in action. So here's our game plan for today. We'll kick off with that first rule, Hebbian learning. Then we'll get to the big twist, learning to forget. We'll see how an amazing electric fish uses this to survive. Then we'll look at how the brain fine-tunes this ability. And finally, we'll see how this is a trick your own brain is using literally right now.
All right, let's jump in. To really get why the forgetting part is so revolutionary, we need to make sure we're all on the same page with this foundational rule of neuroscience.
Now, our understanding of this has gotten way more precise since 1949. We've gone from just firing together to something called spike timing dependent plasticity. And here's the crucial part. It's not just about firing at the same time. The timing has to be perfect. The first neuron has to fire just before the second one. We're talking within a window of maybe 40 milliseconds. It's all about causality. One neuron has to prove that it's helping to make the next one fire.
Okay, so we have this powerful rule for making connections stronger. But what happens when the brain needs to do the exact opposite?
I mean, think about it. The world is just bombarding us with information we need to ignore. The feeling of your clothes on your skin, the quiet hum of your computer, the sound of your own breathing. If our brain strengthened its connection to every single predictable signal, we'd be completely overwhelmed. It has to have a way to dial down the volume on the expected stuff so it can actually notice what's new and important.
And it does that with a kind of mirror image rule. If Hebbian learning strengthens connections when one neuron helps fire the next, anti-Hebbian learning comes in and actively weakens that very same connection. It's the brain's way of saying, okay, I've seen this before, I know what's coming next, I'm going to learn to subtract this from my reality.
The technical term for this is anti-Hebbian plasticity. It lets the nervous system build what you can think of as a negative image of a predictable pattern. By learning exactly what to expect, the brain can create a signal that cancels it out perfectly. And when you cancel out the noise, any new sound or signal suddenly pops out with amazing clarity. Now, to see just how critical this mechanism is, we're going to look at an absolutely wild case study from the animal kingdom, where this isn't just a neat trick, it's a matter of life and death. I want you to meet the marmoset fish. It's a weakly electric fish, and it sees the world by generating an electric field around its body. But here's the catch. The electric pulse it sends out is so incredibly powerful that it completely blinds its own sensors. It can't detect the tiny electric signals from its prey. It's literally like trying to hear a whisper while you're shouting at the top of your lungs. So, how on earth does it solve this? With a brilliant piece of internal wiring. Every single time the fish's brain tells its electric organ to fire, it sends a copy of that command, called a corollary discharge, over to the sensory part of its brain. It's basically an internal heads-up memo that says, incoming, get ready for a massive self-generated pulse. And this is where the magic happens. That heads-up signal, the corollary discharge, arrives at the sensory neurons just milliseconds before the actual shockwave of sensory data from its own electric pulse hits. And that precise timing, that's the perfect trigger for anti-Hebbian plasticity. The brain sees that this one signal always predicts the huge sensory blast, so it just starts to systematically weaken that connection, building a perfect negative image of its own pulse. And the result is absolutely perfect cancellation. The fish's brain learns to completely subtract the feeling of its own electric shout. All the predictable noise is gone, and what's left is a crystal clear sensory canvas, allowing the fish to pick up on the tiniest, faintest electric signals from its prey. It has to learn to ignore itself to see the world. But it gets even more sophisticated than that. This isn't just some crude on-off switch for noise. See, for the fish, just canceling its entire signal would be useless. It needs to sense the subtle ways that its own field gets distorted by objects and prey. It can't just cancel everything. So it needs a much more delicate filter, one that it can adjust on the fly. It needs to be in control of the learning process itself.
And it gets that control through something called dendritic spike threshold control. Basically, this lets the higher parts of its brain dynamically regulate the whole process. Think of it like turning the dial on a pair of high-tech noise-canceling headphones. It can dial the cancellation up or down moment by moment to get the perfect filter for the job.
Now, this might sound like a really bizarre solution for one specific fish, but let's zoom out. Because this exact same principle is a fundamental trick used all across the animal kingdom, including by us.
Sharks and rays use it to ignore the electrical noise from their own gills. Other fish use it to subtract the sensory information coming from their own tail movements. And in mammals like us, our auditory system uses this exact trick to filter out the sound of our own voice when we talk, or the incredibly loud crunching noises we make when we eat.
So here's the big takeaway from all of this. We need to completely reframe what learning is. It's not just this additive process of piling on new knowledge. A huge, critical part of learning is actually this adaptive, subtractive process, the amazing skill of ignoring the predictable noise of our own bodies so we can focus our attention on what really matters.
So just think about it for a second. Right now, as you're sitting there, can you feel the chair you're sitting on? The touch of your clothes? Maybe a low hum in the room? These are all sensations your brain has expertly learned to ignore, to forget, just for you. So it makes you wonder, what else is your brain canceling out right now so that you can focus on the world?